Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel. So, being a gaming while philosophy whilst philosophy whilst gaming or something like that channel, I figured I would go on the internet and look up what are actually the most common philosophical questions that people ask. So I came across an article written by Gizmodo where it attempts to address this question. What are the most common philosophical questions? And being one who's quite interested in philosophy myself, I thought I didn't think that the article was written particularly well, and I'll be revealing to you why. So first up is actually just the intro. The intro was bad. So the intro basically says the following. Let me just get to a safe place here. A safe space. Some people are triggered by that word, but yeah, just get. So basically, what they say is, philosophy goes where science can't or won't, and then it goes to say, which is true. Usually, it's where scientists won't, but that depends, because scientists they like philosophy sometimes and they hate it other times. Mostly when the philosophy disproves or makes them look silly, sort of thing. This is actually the case with a lot of people. It says philosophers have a license to speculate about everything from metaphysics to morality. Now, this is with the first misconception that people have about philosophers. It's not mere speculation. Although this is sometimes what a lot of the people get the impression about a lot of the time, is that philosophy is just, how can you say, it's kind of like what the Greeks started out doing before science proper was really invented. What the Greeks did was, or should I say their version of science, was basically sort of sit back and then just simply assume that whatever's the most logical to you is what must be going on in the universe. That's basically how the ancient Greeks basically did science, as it were. And but even then, it wasn't just, oh, well, let me just sit here and just, whatever comes to mind and I'll just speculate, sort of thing. It's a lot more than that. And one of the things that makes it not like that is, a lot of people don't know. So, for example, when you're dealing with science or you're dealing with whatever, everyone knows about the laws of logic, right? We hear about this sometimes, the laws of logic. So it's philosophy that gives us the laws of logic. Right. So, what is an ad hominem? What is the appeal to authority fallacy? What is what other fallacies, sort of thing? What's a genetic fallacy, for example? What is begging the question? All sorts of things like that. Right? Is basically what philosophy gives you. It's these laws. And so when a philosopher is looking at a particular question, he's not just speculation. It's not just, oh, well, just anything goes, really, whatever I can imagine, and then the most creative guy with the coolest story is the one who wins. It's not that. I mean, they're highly bound to the laws of logic. You're not free to just do or say whatever you want. You're bound by the laws of logic. You've got to be coherent. Whatever you're thinking about, it's got to be at least internally coherent, right? So you can't say that X is true and then X is not true at the same time. That's incoherent. It's a self-contradiction, sort of thing. So philosophers aren't just they're not completely unbound by anything at all. If anything, philosophers are a lot more bound even than scientists are a lot of the times, because a lot of times scientists, they'll do an experiment, and then when it comes to their conclusion, so for example, one of the things philosophy teaches you is that there's a difference between data and the interpretation of the data, right? So data is just data. Data still has to be interpreted. Data doesn't, information or observations, it doesn't tell you what's going on. It's just, well, here's a fact. And there's a difference between facts and then what the facts maybe say to us. And when you're assessing what facts say or what facts mean or what data says or means, you are then engaging in philosophy. And how you interpret that data will completely depend on your worldview, right? And a lot of scientists, though they feel themselves constrained by the data, right? They're not constrained at all a lot of times, because more often than not, scientists are not very philosophically sophisticated at all, right? So they might be constricted by the data, but they're not constricted by the laws of logic at all, or by the laws of internal coherence, arbitrariness, begging the question, because they're not. And this, you see this a lot of time. So, for example, a lot of scientists, when talking about, for example, artificial intelligence, are like, oh, artificial intelligence is going to take over the world, and this is why, and all these kinds of things. These guys basically have no idea what computers can or cannot do. So a lot of them like to, mostly because it's salient for publicity and stuff like that, they like to say, oh, these things can think and they're going to take over and whatever. Well, they can't actually, because you're then bound by the laws of what's algorithmic and non-algorithmic and all these kinds of things. You've got to, and that kind of stuff. And then a lot of things that scientists say, a lot of the times, because they want publicity or because they want to make something they're researching look better maybe than it is, in order to get money to fund the research, they'll come up with a whole bunch of nonsense sort of thing that just is not the case. So one of the biggest things that scientists say, which is an absolute load of garbage, for example, is that science can explain everything, or that science will eventually explain everything. And you see scientists do this a lot. The idea that science can and will eventually explain everything. Well, it would be like saying, listen, here's a hammer, because at the end of the day, science is a tool. Yeah, it's a tool. That's all it is. And I'm not saying anything against science when I say this. Science is a tool designed to perform a specific kind of work. Okay, and so it would be me like saying, oh, look, I've got a hammer, and this hammer can do every single kind of work that there is to be done on the planet. That would be self-evidently nonsensical, because science is not actually, because the hammer is not designed to do everything. You know what I mean? And so it's the same thing with science, right? Science is designed to investigate the physical world, right? So if there's anything that is not physical, right, that is not physical, science would have absolutely no access to that at all, just because it's not designed that way, right? So it can't. And the thing is, because it's not designed that way, science cannot even tell you whether metaphysical things even exist or do not exist, right? In the same way, let's say I've got a thermometer. A thermometer is designed to measure temperature. It's designed, because it's designed to measure temperature, you can't use it then to go to like a socket on your wall and use it to tell you whether there is voltage there. Not only can it not tell you what kind of voltage is there, it can't even tell you whether there is voltage there or not in the first place. You understand what I'm saying? Because it's not designed to do that. And so this is the thing with science. And I've seen many scientists, like there's Peter, I think it's Peter Atkins, for example, who's a preeminent chemist. I've seen him go in public debates, basically saying that science can explain everything, and if science can't explain it, then it's not really worth knowing. And this is just so silly. It's so utterly ridiculous. And the fact of the matter is, right, even that statement cannot be scientifically proven. The very statement that science can explain everything cannot be proven even by science itself. You know what I'm saying? There's no ways he could arrive at that conclusion scientifically. Why? Well, because science, first of all, you could only make that statement, right? So let's take the statement, science can explain everything there is to know, right? You can only make that statement once science has already explained everything, right? You can't say science explains everything until you've actually explained everything with science, because otherwise, if you have not explained everything, then science will tell you, hang on, you're not allowed to say that because we haven't actually explained everything, right? Science would reject that conclusion, right? So basically, he's speaking philosophically, not scientifically, when he says that science can or does or will explain everything. You cannot say that science can explain everything, or even that it will, until it has. That's one of the most important things that one needs to realize about science. Until it has, science cannot say that it either can or will, because there's a certain skepticism and a certain we can't say it until we've run the tests, done the double blind, repeated the tests, done the observations, etc., etc. Until then, we can't say anything, sort of thing. And secondly, because science could not even detect the metaphysical, even if it did, if the metaphysical does exist, that means the stuff that is not physical, it wouldn't even be able to detect that. So one can't say, well, it doesn't exist because science doesn't detect it. Well, you can't say that, because even if it was there, it's like the thermometer. It's like saying, because the thermometer did not pick up voltage, therefore there is no voltage there. I mean, you know exactly what would happen if you stuck your finger into that socket. You've got basically a 50% chance of electrocuting yourself, right? So this is a totally nonsensical thing. And you can see the utter lack of sophistication when scientists, like physicists, for example, take old Neil deGrasse Tyson. Constantly, he's always like, oh yeah, science this and science that, but he's for the. And I know a lot of people like the guy, and this is not against the guy. I mean, he's a good showman, if nothing else, right? And he was a good scientist back in his day. I don't know whether he's still currently doing any original research or anything like that. But half the time when deGrasse Tyson goes on television, half the stuff he says is total crap, because 90% of the time he's not speaking scientifically, he's speaking philosophically, and because he has no philosophical training, he can't even tell the difference between when he is speaking philosophically and when he is speaking scientifically. He's got no idea, sort of thing. So that's one of the most basic things that people sort of really need to understand. That people just really need to understand that philosophy is nowhere near just speculate. It's not merely speculation, right? And one of the most powerful things that even limits scientists are the laws of logic, right? If something is not logical, even the evidence is subject to what is logical. The evidence, we have to say, the evidence has to make sense. You know what I'm saying? So even if you're like wanting to be all scientific and stuff like that with just hard data, it has to be coherent. It has to make sense. It has to be logical. It has to be coherent. All of these things these are philosophical constraints. Even it must be true, right? It must be true. Science can't assess truth, right? It can give you a fact, but it can't tell you. So, for example, one of the things you have to assume in science, like you go and you do your experiment and you collect data, right? And one of the things that you simply assume is that you have to be honest and you have to report your results honestly. Science can't tell you why you must be honest, sort of thing. It can't even assess honesty, because honesty is a metaphysical thing, and it's something that you have to presuppose. It's built into science. You have to presuppose it, otherwise you can't even begin to do science in the first place. It's built in. It's something that science just has to assume to be something of value, going in. You can't say, oh, well, we're going to run an experiment. We're not going to assume that truth and honesty and stuff like that are right. We're going to do the scientific experiment. Well, this is the problem then, right? So, you're going to be then free to lie and all these kinds of things and stuff like that. It means then the experiment won't work because you're not using truth, you're not using honesty, you're not using any of those things, kind of stuff. So yeah, these things are always very, very important to understand and appreciate, sort of thing. So yeah, so the next question they say, so the most number one, in their number one thing, they talk about why is there something rather than nothing. I'm just sort of reading the thing here, right? The presence of the universe is something too bizarre for words. and they go on basically to say that the best answer that they've come up with, right? The best answer they've come up with. So I'm just going to do that on this video. I'm going to do a separate video for each one of their points, just to, we'll see how we go. So basically, they say they end up in the thing is concluding that the best answer that philosophers have managed to come up with is what's known as the anthropic principle. The anthropic principle, which basically means to say, well, obviously, it's so silly. Again, it's not what the best answer is. So the anthropical principle basically says that we shouldn't be surprised that the universe, a universe that can support life, exists. We shouldn't be surprised because, well, if it didn't, we wouldn't be here, right? So it's like, well, it exists because it exists is kind of, it's a completely silly. The anthropic principle is like saying, well, we're here because we're here, and therefore there's no mystery, sort of thing, because if we weren't here, we wouldn't be here, and so the universe must be able to exist and must be able to support life because otherwise we wouldn't be here. Well, that doesn't actually explain anything, does it? At all. And the reason why something like Gizmodo or whatever would say this is because of the philosophical pre-commitment, right? And this is where it's very, very important for philosophy to come in, because we realize people have biases and they have pre-commitments. So pre-commitment is something that you've decided beforehand. There's nothing wrong with that, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we all have to start somewhere, right? But there's this pre-commitment to not allowing religious explanations, sort of thing, right? Because the fact of the matter is some people have offered another solution. Well, it's here because it was created. Sort of the theory of intelligent design. Now, the theory of intelligent design says, well, it could be anything, right? It could be some super aliens, it could be God, it could be whatever sort of thing. But basically, it was an intelligence that designed it, sort of thing. And some other people say, well, it's here because of a multiverse, sort of thing. Is a multiverse, or it's some super alien. Although in fairness, right, if you think about it, the super alien race is no different to saying God did it. It's just people who are not religious for some reason are quite happy with aliens, but God's not allowed, no matter what. By all means, you got to leave God out of the sort of thing. And basically, you'll say, what kind of aliens? What are the abilities that the aliens would have to possess in order to be able to create a universe? And then when you see, like, basically all of the criteria, they basically, all the criteria is like, well, basically makes them gods. So for example, in order to create the universe, you can't exist within the universe. It's got to be outside the universe, right? So that's the first one, that if it's aliens, they have to transcend the universe, sort of thing, right? So transcendence is one of the criteria, right? Which basically, well, makes them basically God, sort of thing. So that's not, and then, so what else? What else would they have to be? The aliens. So that would basically make them God. Well, first of all, creative ability, right? The power over life, sort of thing, is basically makes them God. So yeah, the hypothesis between aliens and God is basically, well, just depends on what you call, is really, it's a semantic difference. But when you actually get down to the nitty gritty, it's like, well, you've basically just described God and called it an alien, sort of thing. Although, if it's an alien, it doesn't really commit you to things like worship. And, well, what kind of aliens does, this alien commit you to worship in various rituals? And does the alien want you to love your neighbor and stuff like that, sort of thing. So it depends. And so essentially, depending on how people are willing to describe the aliens, it would fall basically in line with one of the things that religion has already decided. Some religion out there has already decided that God is like, or is, or expects, or demands, or whatever the case might be. So your alien hypothesis will sound either a lot like Christianity, or it'll sound a lot like Norse mythology, or whatever the case might be, kind of thing. So yeah, so the most, and here's the thing, the most logical conclusions, sort of thing, specifically if you countenance what it actually takes for a universe to exist, right? So the reason multiverse or God comes up, or highly sophisticated aliens, is pretty much because when you look at what's required for a universe to exist, there's something called the fine-tuning principle, and no one argues about this. The universe is fine-tuned for life, sort of thing, and the anthropic principle is mostly an ad hoc kind of no-duh thing to sort of overcome what the fine-tuning principle tells us. So basically, the fine-tuning principle means that all of the laws and constants of the universe, all the parameters, like your weak force, your strong force, and your magnetic field and gravity, and all these kinds of things, these forces and these parameters have to exist in such a precise measure of like one in, it's got to be accurate to a millionth, billionth, quadrillionth, gazillionth of a degree. And if you altered any one of them by 0.0000000 100 times 1% or some ridiculous thing, that basically life would not be possible. So they're like, well, this is so finely tuned, and the only thing that we know that finely tunes anything is something with intelligence, something like a super advanced alien race, or a divine, with the intelligence that basically it's so intelligent, it's basically indistinguishable from God, essentially, is pretty much what you end up with at the end of the day, kind of thing. There's not really much for it, kind of thing. So that's one of the things that one could basically say about that. You're right. That's why the anthropic principle is basically the philosophical equivalent of just hand waving. Well, it is because it is, and if it wasn't, well, then it wouldn't be. It's totally insufficient and totally lacking, and totally, it's silly. It really is silly. It's like those of you that have teenagers. It's like having your teenager be a bit of a smart ass in order to explain why his room isn't clean. Well, why is your room not clean? Well, because I didn't clean it. If your teenager said that to you, you'd probably slap him or something like that. It's like, listen, don't be a smart ass, kind of thing. So yeah, that's basically it. The anthropic principle is silly, totally silly. So so the best explanation is, or the explanations that are on offer, the most predominant ones is either God did it, or some alien race which is basically indistinguishable, so powerful and so capable that it's basically indistinguishable from God, or it's a multiverse. So you do have some problems there. So for example, the multiverse is subject to the infinite regress problem, where it's like, well, basically the multiverse, the multiverse isn't really an explanation, because what it does is it pushes the problem back. So it's like, we know the universe didn't exist forever, for all eternity, right? And we know this because we know this these days. We know it scientifically because we discovered what was the cosmic background radiation, and we understand. Well, there was a Big Bang, and so then the world, it didn't exist, and now it exists, right? And so now we just have to deal with it. Interestingly enough, before the Big Bang was proven conclusively, most scientists did not like the Big Bang. And, a lot of people don't realize this, but the word Big Bang was actually an insult. Even though today we call it Big Bang, the term itself, Big Bang, was invented because people were actually taking the mickey. It was an insult to the theory, right? That they thought the theory was stupid, and so they called it was just this Big Bang, and it was a term of derision. And most scientists, before the conclusive evidence for the Big Bang came in, they did not want, for philosophical reasons, they did not want there to be a beginning to the universe, right? And the reason for this is because it sounded too much like religion. This was a sentiment felt mostly in the West, where Christianity was predominant, and because Christianity believed that the universe had a beginning, they really, really didn't like the idea that the universe had a beginning. But at the end of the day, scientists were absolutely forced to give up their philosophical presupposition or pre-commitment to an infinite universe and accept that the universe is not infinite, and that it was finite in the past, sort of thing. They just, it's like, listen, you just got to deal with this fact. And so in order to preserve, and again, this is when we talk about the multiverse, right? In order to preserve a materialistic explanation for the universe, the multiverse hypothesis was invented, right? Not because there is any evidence, or because obviously you can't have evidence for the multiverse, because how do you go outside of the universe? There can't be scientific evidence for the multiverse, right? So it's purely philosophical. It's totally philosophical. There is no scientific way of going outside of the universe. I mean, we don't even know whether our universe even has an edge to it. There's just no way of telling at this particular time. So when people posit the multiverse and say that's the most likely, it's just, again, this is pure philosophy. And the only reason that one would prefer multiverse over a God hypothesis is because one prefers a naturalistic explanation, right? They have a philosophical commitment to a materialistic universe, or a materialistic explanation, and in their minds a multiverse satisfies this pre-commitment to total materialism, sort of thing. And so, and the problem is that the multiverse itself it doesn't really help, because all it does is it moves the problem back a step, right? So if the universe, and it moves the problem back a step philosophically, it's like, this was the problem with an eternal universe, right? If the universe was eternal, then nothing actually could exist that does exist, that we have today. Because how can you say? Let's say, for example, our existence comes about at time X, right? And before time X, there was an infinite amount of time, an eternal amount of time, right? Now, here's the problem. If an eternal amount of time has to go by before you come into existence, then you would never come into existence, right? Because there would always be because infinity minus infinity is still infinity, right? There would always be more time to pass that has to pass before you come into existence. So if there was if the universe was infinite in the past, you would never exist. You would never come into being. So it's actually a problem with infinity, not just as a concept, but infinity in reality, right? And the consensus is that no actual infinite anything can actually exist in the material universe. It's actually an impossibility, right? Even though we can conceive of infinites. Like, for example, numbers can be infinite, right? You can count from 1 all the way to infinity, and you can keep counting until, well, basically forever, and the numbers will never end. So the set of natural numbers, and so on and so forth, right? The set of what else? The set of all even numbers is also infinite, or the set of all uneven numbers is another subset. So you can even take the infinite set of numbers and subdivide it. So all even numbers, all odd numbers is also an infinite set, and so on and so forth, sort of thing. So we can conceptualize of these things, but whether these things can actually exist or not is another story entirely. And a lot of people say, well, it can't actually exist in this universe. It's impossible in the actual universe, specifically because we know now that the universe is contingent. It is finite, right? Finite in the past, therefore there can be no actual infinites in the universe, sort of thing. And so this is quite important. In this philosophical sense, the philosopher we have the Kalam cosmological argument, right, where it was this philosophy. Well, if the universe, if anything begins to exist, right, then it has to have a cause, right, and the cause has to be outside of itself. And most people, I take it, are familiar with the Kalam cosmological argument. It's like, if everything that begins to exist has a cause, the universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause, because the universe began to exist. And so what does that cause have to be like? And then you can speculate, well, what would we need for a universe, for a universe to come into existence, to cause? What kind of thing would we expect to be the cause of a universe? And then we have, whether it's intelligence, whether it's, all various different kinds of things and stuff like that. And so some people say, well, a multiverse. Now, the multiverse doesn't work because the multiverse is subject to the same infinite regress problem as the universe. So the multiverse can't be infinite in the past for the same reason that our universe can't be infinite in the past, which then means that one has to account for where the multiverse itself came from, what caused the multiverse, and then you go on and on and on. What caused that? What caused that? And then you've got an infinite regress, sort of thing. And so that itself is a problem. And then let's get rid of all this stuff. Otherwise, I won't be able to pick anything up anymore. Well, no, don't pick that up. Don't pick that up. Oh dear. So let's just get rid of this stuff. Right. So the multiverse is basically subject to the same problems. It couldn't work because of the infinite regress problem, and so the concept of a god doesn't actually suffer from this particular issue. So what happens is there are things that are contingent things, so things that depend on something prior in order to bring them into existence, right? And so basically what happens is God is something that is not contingent. So you've got something, it's either contingent or it's necessary, right? Something exists necessarily. So there's something about this thing that makes it necessarily existent. It cannot fail to exist. And this is basically what the concept of God is like, right? It's something that exists necessarily. There's no physical object that could exist in this way. In a way, we have no example of this, sort of thing that could exist in this kind of fashion, right? Necessary existence. The multiverse would also be contingent. Where did that come from? There's nothing about it that makes it exist necessarily or by the necessity of its own nature, because essentially all it is a universe generating phenomena, right? That itself generates universes, sort of thing. And then which was, again, I say develop because it has to be, because if the assumption is materialism, well, then materialism sort of thing. We can't do anything about it. We have to posit this because we don't want to allow God in the door of our philosophy, especially Western. This is mostly a Western issue, right? Eastern, a lot of people in the East don't really mind this sort of thing. It's like, yeah, well, it could be, it could not be. Who cares? Sort of thing. So it's very much a cultural phenomena, or insistence, should we say, that it's got to be done, sort of a European kind of way of thinking, sort of thing, for reasons that no one explains, sort of thing. No one ever really says, well, why can't the explanation be God? I mean, what possible reason could there be? There doesn't seem to be anything in the universe or in thought or philosophy that says that this is not allowed. It makes no sense, sort of thing. So yeah, it really boils down to necessary existence, contingent existence. What kind of things could we expect this to have? And so when it comes to something like a deity, right, or an alien species, or whatever the case might be, they would have the intelligence to fine-tune a universe and say, well, in order to build the universe and get carbon like this and to get all the elements like that and this and that and the next thing, they could quite easily be like, oh yeah, well, this is we can, I picked up the wrong gun then, by the looks of it. So basically, yeah, it would be, I'm getting my ass handed to me. Abominator. Hey, that's quite a name. It's the Abominator. It's come to kill you. So yeah, an intelligence would basically account for the fine tuning. So we wouldn't have. So for example, one of the things in philosophy is basically Occam's razor, right? Don't multiply entities without cause, right? It's the principle of parsimony, right? So basically, the multiverse posits 500 million billion universes in order to explain just one. Whereas an alien or God explanation, or whatever it is you prefer, only posits one entity to explain the universe, rather than saying, well, here's this universe generating thing and it's generated 10 to the power of 20 trillion universes and stuff like that, and we can't even explain really why, where this thing comes from or anything like that. We can't account for it. We don't know its properties. We don't know anything, sort of thing. And it totally violates the principle of Occam's razor. So a deity, or an alien, so the deity alien hypothesis sort of thing, where basically the alien is so defined that it's basically God. It has to exist necessarily, because if the aliens don't exist necessarily, then we have to explain, well, how did the aliens come into existence? So unless these aliens are of the sort that they cannot fail to exist, so their existence is necessary, they have to exist. There's nothing that can make them not exist. Then they would be subject to the infinite regress issue. It's like, well, where did they come from? And okay, well, then there's an explanation there. Okay, well, where did that come from? And then so on and so forth. So you run into a problem. So if you define the aliens as existing necessarily, well, again, how's that different from God? It's the exact same thing as God, sort of thing. And this is how philosophically we can unpick these things and unpack these things. It's like, these are what is required for logical consistency. And so unless someone wants to say, well, we don't, at a certain point in the universe, the laws of logic no longer apply. And now you could say that, but then it's like, well, because they're like, well, why do we have to be logical when it comes to the multiverse? and stuff like that. Is it really necessary? Sort of thing. Why couldn't we just abandon logic because it's a different universe? It could operate under different laws of logic, for example. The problem with that, though, is quite a profound one. It's like, well, if the laws of logic are going to break down at a certain point and we're going to allow that, then we have to say, okay, well, then, you can have a unicorn creating the universe and not creating a multiverse, and still, there's nothing illogical about that. Or you could say the universe created itself. It's like, well, that's self-contradictory. The universe can't create itself because in order to create itself, it must first exist. And so if it already exists, it doesn't need to create itself, sort of thing. So, these are, and once you really get into the nitpicky of it, you realize that it's not, you can't merely speculate and come up with whatever you like merely because it suits your fancy. Philosophers really are bound. It's a very, very strict, very, very difficult discipline. And even though I'm engaging philosophy on this channel, I by no means do I do so because, I'm not a professional philosopher or anything like that. I just enjoy it. It's an interesting subject. There's still a lot I don't know. But, it's like once you really get an appreciation for it and you get into the philosophy of things, you realize, you know what? These philosophers, they're not just making stuff up. It's not just fanciful thinking and wordplay. And again, scientists can be very, very disparaging about when it comes to philosophy. They're like, oh, it's just silly word games. It's like, it's not just silly word games. You really are constrained quite a lot in terms of what can or can't be accepted and stuff like that. Philosophy gets peer reviewed just like everything else. It's one of the oldest disciplines, in the world. It's really difficult. It's hard going, sort of thing, and people think they can just treat it like it's like it's nothing, and get away with it. No, you can't really, and and as it happens, having philosophy in your own life can be very helpful, even just to you as an individual as well. If you can be more philosophically rigorous in your own life when it comes to sort of decision making and how you treat other people and things like that, or it's very, very well. I can attest, it's very, very useful, sort of thing. So yeah. I figured I would bring that point. Across. The anthropic principle is really is silly. It's nonsensical. It's like I said, asking a kid, why isn't your room clean? Well, it's not clean because I didn't clean it. Sort of thing. That's anthropic principle. Well, how do we explain the fine tuning? How do we explain the existence of the universe? Oh, well, it is because it is. And if it wasn't, we wouldn't be here to ask the questions. So. Therefore, that's it. It's really, really not good at all. It's a problem, sort of thing. And then it just goes to show how philosophically unsophisticated a lot of people are, that they think it's probably because they get their philosophy from the Big Bang Theory. So for those of you that don't know, Big Bang Theory is this television show about all these nerds and all that kind of stuff, and there's this one dude that's a total genius, and they actually talk about the anthropic principle in there, and how Sheldon seems to approve of the anthropic principle, and because he's a genius, a lot of people, and they think that, and they've had like really serious, they've had like Stephen Hawking and stuff like that, and so it sometimes gives people the impression that even though it's a comedy and it's just for pure entertainment, that whatever's on there, really a lot of people learn from watching television. They're like, I don't know why people do that. It's like I saw it on TV and therefore this is my worldview. People really do that. It's just so silly. But yeah, it gives the false impression that this television program is more well researched and stuff like that than it really is, at least in a philosophical sense. When it's not at all. It's actually quite silly. It's a comedy at the end of the day. Very, very unsophisticated philosophy, this anthropic principle sort of thing. It takes very, very little of what the universe is actually like into account at all. which is a big problem. It's a very serious problem. Oh, this guy is gonna kick my butt. Oh, I'm nearly dead. You dead. Right. Let's see if, whoa, this guy is really, ouch. That's me. Oh. So, yeah, so that's the conclusion, basically, on that particular matter. You know, yeah, like I was saying, Anthropic doesn't actually explain anything. It's hand waving. And from the Anthropic principle, you can't account for the fine tuning. You can't account for the laws of the universe. You can't account for the existence of the laws of logic. You can't even account for the existence of human intelligence. You know, human intelligence, our emotions. You know, because human intelligence is non-algorithmic. You know, we don't think only in terms of laws of logic. We don't think like robots. You know, creativity, you know, the possibility of knowledge even, you know, sort of thing. If things are purely materialistic and everything's just this chemical process and all that kind of stuff. And that actually gets into other topics that I have on this little program thing that I want to get to. Where is it? Because they talk about this as well on this particular channel. What's it? This little thing. So the next is our universe real? The classic Cartesian thing that, you know, they go on to speculate. So it's like, you know, you're obviously going to ask this question if you fail to, and you know, again, it's all about presupposition. So even Descartes, he had his almost materialistic presuppositions, as it were. You know, which itself is going to inform, oh, well, is this really real? Let's try this radical. So that was Descartes. Let's try this radical doubt. You know, how can I doubt anything? You know, how can I know anything is real? It's basically a question of epistemology. How do I know what is real and what is not real and what is what, sort of thing? And the problem with Descartes is he concludes in I think, therefore I am. But even that's not true. You know, even that is not radical enough on that view. And ultimately, it's quite self-defeating. It's quite a big problem. So yeah. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, you know what? I'm going to leave it there on that particular question, at least. Sort of thing, because. This is meant to be. I mean, I could do a lot more like horrible, exclusive, you know, painstaking detail. But you know, that's not the purpose of this channel. It's just to be like, just a general, chill introduction to the questions of philosophy and, you know, what we can and cannot say about stuff, sort of thing. So I'm going to leave this with a little bit of gameplay and. Yeah, so basically, for those of you who are still watching, what my plan is, this is going to go up on YouTube for those of you that are interested, because until I actually become affiliate with Twitch, I'm not going to be able to actually post videos to the channel. So I'm posting everything up to YouTube, and I'm going to operate the YouTube channel simultaneously. And for those of you that are interested, basically, like this game, as you might have seen other people come into to play co-op. So this I can play up to 4 people. So if you wanted to, I mean, if you had this game, I think this game is free these days. You would be able to sort of pop in. We could play this together. And you could chat with me while we play and talk about stuff, you know, just shoot the breeze about philosophical things. It doesn't even have to be philosophical things, you know, it can be anything really. But you know, it could be psychology, which is a branch of philosophy, in all fairness. You know, philosophy, and it can be all kinds of philosophy, religious, the philosophy of science, the philosophy of history, and all sorts of things, you know. Will be cool. Political, statecraft and all that kind of thing. Is there an Illuminati controlling us all behind the scenes? Who knows? we can discuss it, sort of thing. And we're going to discuss anything. We're going to try be as open-minded as possible here, and not tell people that they can or can't say things. It's like free speech, man, all the way, sort of thing. So yeah, right. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Take it easy.